What's scarier than a government shutdown, getting very, very close to the debt ceiling, and this crazy, disastrous rollout of Obamacare? The fact that the political fighting and the social tension may get ratcheted up yet to another level in just a couple of weeks. Talking about that on a scary Halloween edition of Get Right with Lenny McAllister. Boo! Starting right
now. Get Right with Lenny McAllister.
Inviting you to the thriller.
The way we help bring back America and we build the bridges and bring people together is by making sure we hold everybody accountable in a 360 fashion. So let me close with this. Yes, there is a change that we can believe in, but it will never come from a politician or a government program.
We cannot find physical sanity here in the land of Lincoln, from Carbondale to Elgin, in which collectively continue to tolerate the insanity found on the streets of South Chicago and East Texas of the world.
We got to move away from the American Idol soundbite nature of politics and back to the American statesman of humble servant leadership that we used to see in politics. It is time to roll out the era of the new, educated, engaged, and energized American citizen. I go to the jail ministry. I speak to the kids in the streets. So I'm never going to lay down being conservative just as much as I'll never lay down being a proud African American.
I feel like a black republic. Money I got coming in. Can't turn my back on the hood. I got love for
Look, I'm not going to do the doom and gloom that other people do, but we are going to talk about what seems to be putting us on a very, very scary path here on the Halloween edition of Get Right with Lenny McAllister, the podcast where you and I have an opportunity to vibe and talk on a daily basis. You know where to find me on Twitter. Very simple, LENNYMCALLISTER. Facebook, tinyurl.com/LENNYPAGE. Now, there are a lot of things that we could talk about, and I know that if you go to the typical conservative, that you're probably going to hear about the Obamacare hearing with Sebelius, and we talked about that yesterday. They're going to continue to harp upon that. They're going to talk to you about Benghazi, which, I mean, there's something to be said about there. And there's also some other things to talk about, including my former congressman in North Carolina, Mel Watt, not being able to go through the Senate approval process because of what's going on in Washington. Yeah, we could talk about those things, but there's this perfect storm. And of course, I want your feedback. That's why I gave you the Twitter handle and the Twitter name. That's why I gave you the Facebook URL, the Facebook website to go to, this, that, and the other, so forth and so on. The social media obligation that I have at the beginning of the podcast. I made sure I met that obligation, put that out there, went from there, if you will. So with that said, let me go from here and say this. If you look at what's been going on with Obamacare, if you look at the fact that you got the NSA situation that just unraveled and just plopped right down in the president's lap at a time when Obamacare was unraveling domestically. We just got over the Syrian crisis from a geopolitical perspective. Now you have this NSA controversy coming up. We just got over a government shutdown. I mean, doesn't it seem as though it was a long time ago when the government was shut down, when people were complaining about that? That seems like months ago. That was the beginning of October. We're simply at the end of October, and the government wasn't shut down for 48 hours, folks. So we had the government shutdown. We were getting very, very close and perilously close to hitting the debt ceiling, which would have freaked out the markets around the world. And we heard about it, and we've already gone through this in 2008. Why would we want to do that again? So we just went through that a couple of weeks ago. Wasn't that long ago. A couple of weeks ago. And we still have to look at this all coming up within it's really a matter of weeks. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah, it's going to extend into the very early part of 2014, but the negotiations have to be happening now. They're going to have to continue to go through the Thanksgiving holiday season and weekend and hope that by the time we get to mid-December, we're not doing this all over again. So that's something to fear. That's something that we need to really get ahead of as an American people and as leaders in Washington and at the state level as well, those that can press the buttons to make sure that the type of change that we need to transpire will happen. But right now, that's not looking too promising. That's pretty scary. Then you look at the fighting that's going to happen on Capitol Hill. It's not just about Congressman Mel Watt. That's small potatoes, and I'm not trying to downplay him. What I'm saying is, with what they're going to do with blocking the nomination process for him, if you heard Lindsey Graham, he said we're not putting anybody in, including Watt and anybody else. I mean, we're about to ratchet up the political fighting to a brand new level. And if we're going higher than we just were, in the midst of the 2014 midterms, in the midst of the Obamacare debacle that's rolling out, in the midst of the NSA debacle, Syria didn't go anywhere. Just because we're not watching it doesn't mean that debacle may not have consequences. For all we know, I mean, again, the president tried to be hands-off about this in 2011, went after Libya, was hoping that this would get resolved, and here we sat in 2013 talking about 2012 campaign rhetoric and red lines. That almost got us into a military situation in 2013. So we don't know when that's going to come back to bite us or revisit us once again as an issue, as a geopolitical matter in obviously one of the most tense regions of the world. So that's something to be, a little frightened of as well on a holiday. For some people, it's a holiday. If you're Wiccan, it's a holiday. For the rest of us, it's just go eat your kid's candy. Did I say that out loud? Yes, I did. When you have a 4-year-old and a baby, they don't really have that much say-so over how much candy they're going to be able to eat. That's all there is to it. So, Halloween for the parents, yay us. In moderation, of course. I don't drink, so candy and some Kit Kats every now and then, it's not going to hurt anybody. Anywho, the scary thing on this Halloween edition that we're looking at is Syria may still come back to revisit us. The NSA and the lessening of the global esteem, which was not supposed to get any lower under President George W. Bush. And I'm not saying it's lower now, but I'm saying that it was supposed to be fully restored, which it just after this NSA situation has not been. The latest story that the government's been hacking into Google? Come on. I mean, some of it you can sit there and say, yeah, we understand, if you're going to keep America safe. But this was the problem when people opposed the Patriot Act. This was the problem after 9/11. In a nation where you have freedoms, that government, because they're not God, cannot keep you completely free. So you're going to be fearful of what could happen, but you're going to keep your liberty in hand, in pocket, in tow, daily, regularly, or you're going to sacrifice it. You're going to give it up, and you're going to have these type of stories. For me, that's scary. When you have a government that wants to take over 16% of the healthcare system, and you're seeing the debacle from the technical side. I don't want to see the bureaucratic side of things. You're seeing government not be able to work together in major crisis situations, major moments in our nation's history. We have now gone through this debt ceiling situation, as you well know, several times over the last 3 years. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going away. The tone hasn't changed. In fact, the tone is ratcheting up. So from a political standpoint, and this is why I'm saying we're living in some scary, scary, scary times. Because from a political standpoint, want your feedback, agree, disagree, you know where to find me, Twitter and on Facebook. But it's more than just a political standpoint. I mean, just from a political standpoint, they're trying to ratchet this up. But if you, and I know that people will sit there and say, here you go, race baiting. Please. That sleepy little town down in Georgia, Valdosta, the U.S. Attorney General's office just said that they're going to open an investigation in the death of that poor high school student that was found dead in a high school wrestling match. Now, what I'm going to tell you, and you may or may not agree with me, but this is why I say we're living in dangerous times as an American society, aside from the politics and the geopolitical matters that are scary enough, aside from the economic pressures that we're all feeling in this quote-unquote recovery. You know, that the definition of that word has changed since President Obama's been in office. But recovery. Aside from those three things, internal politics, geopolitical matters, and the economic recovery. After the Voting Rights Act has been struck down, at least Section 4 has been attacked, after you've had Supreme Court rulings on affirmative action or statements on affirmative action, after the George Zimmerman not guilty verdict, and then he goes and gets into it with his wife, ex-wife, when they, had the money, didn't have the money, back and forth. Most people call that lying, but we won't get into that either. Another day, another season for the aftermath of the Zimmerman trial, focusing exclusively on the trial. I'm sure we'll be talking about that in its 1-year anniversary next summer. But with the Voting Rights Act situation, with the voter ID laws going down, with the Supreme Court decision on affirmative action, with the George Zimmerman not guilty verdict, with the, continued prison existence of Marissa Alexander in Florida, with John McNeil just being released in Georgia for Stand Your Ground, after Zimmerman, although he didn't get off because of Stand Your Ground, got off because of Stand Your Ground. If there's any evidence that there was foul play and there was any more racial tension involved in the situation down in Valdosta, Georgia, which, by the way, the black community down there, from my understanding, is already upset because they felt as though the authorities did not handle the situation the way they should have. And there's already racial tensions going on down there before the murder investigation that was considered an accidental death, where the family had to hire their own investigative team to find out that this was likely murder, and that, by the way, the kid didn't have some internal organs. Which in and of itself, I've never heard, I'm a dad of a teenager, I've never had to tell my teenage kids that, hey, I told you stop playing with your spleen. No, it doesn't happen. I told you your spleen would fall out one day. I mean, you hear about getting poked in the eye, but you tell 2-year-olds that. But internal organs being removed because you were just horsing around? See, and that's why they were already upset previously, and then they got upset when it found out that this might have been a homicide. Looks like it was a homicide. And then you find out these type of details coming out as well. The body was stuffed with paper in certain parts. Now, I will tell you, you may disagree with me 100%, but intense economic times, intense political times, under the first black president, first African-American president that we have here in the United States of America, and everybody is on pins and needles as we are hoping the economy kind of gets a little bit of a jolt as we go into the holiday season. After a very hard year. I mean, it hasn't even been one full year after Sandy Hook. Hasn't been one full year since their re-election. Hasn't been one full year since the Zimmerman trial. Hasn't been one full year since a lot of things that have really, this all has happened within 12 months. And a nation that is already on the edge, without a lot of moral leadership out there to calm people down, for people to trust. People don't trust their president as much anymore. People don't trust their Congress, their Senate. They're cynical about half of America, depending on what side of the aisle they sit on politically. You have a more tense nation when it comes to race relations. When it comes to dialogue back and forth, people aren't working, people are struggling. You have times and signs of austerity. You got all these things going on. People are ignoring the poor, and the poor is growing at epic rates. If you take all these things and you, to me, add one more issue to it, one more thing for the media to focus on, one more thing for people to voice their opinions on, and not just regular opinions. Oh, no. Regular opinions would be just fine if that's all it was. But it's not just going to be regular opinions. It's going to be some of the most toxic, hateful, misinformed, and ignorant perhaps I dare say even ignorant opinions and perspectives that will be shared. If this story gets that going and then they find out that somebody white genuinely covered it up and or had a hand in this murder, do not be surprised if the animus that is brewing in America jumps to another level, and I pray to God it doesn't boil over. Now, am I rooting for that? Obviously not. You can't be a black Republican conservative cradle Catholic that's pro-life, that has done Tea Party events, that has friends in the NAACP, the Urban League, works with urban environments, and comes from a multi-national perspective when it comes to media, when it comes to diversity, etc. You can't have that background and either A, look yourself in the mirror and like what you see, and I do like what I see. It's not perfect, but I like what I see. Or B, not walk out and say, we're at the pinnacle of the very worst that can happen in this country. Everybody glamorizes the 1960s. And yeah, we had the 50th year anniversary of the March on Washington. We've had the 50th year anniversary of things like the Game of Change, which I learned about by being on the south side of Chicago, where literally people had to sneak out of a state. They had to sneak out of a state to go play a basketball game because it was against the law in their state to play against an integrated basketball team. I mean, we glamorize the people that were historic during that point of time, but we don't really capitalize and really grasp what that courage meant. These people were dying. They were under threat of death and mutilation and terror on a regular basis, walking right outside their door. And that's where we're headed, folks. That is where we are headed as a nation, because you can't look at anything and mirror back to 50 years ago. We're approaching the 50-year anniversary of the Kennedy assassination. You cannot look at, and what? We just hit the 12 months since the 50-year anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, what I'm saying to you is, and again, agree, disagree. You look at the parallels between 50 years ago and now. What could people grasp onto in the 1960s? Political leaders were getting shot. Civil rights leaders were getting shot. Teenagers were getting bit by dogs. People were disappearing. You had, at one point in time, an economy that wasn't too good, specifically wasn't very good for people that were poor or African American. You had assaults on civil rights, voting rights. You had a segregation of America that was fighting and trying to hold on. Now you see a resegregation of America in a lot of ways, economically, from an academic standpoint, etc. People did not trust their government as much. I mean, when Kennedy was assassinated, who did they blame? They blamed the government for taking out Kennedy. It's either the Russians, the Cubans, or the Americans. And that's a darn shame, and that lives to this day. So let's go back to 1963. Let's look at 2013. People don't trust their government. People are fighting back and forth. It's a very tenuous time geopolitically. Domestically, we're fighting each other. We don't trust ourselves. I mean, at least then we have more moral leadership that was out there. And heck, they were still controversial characters. People idolize Malcolm X now. They didn't back then. Heck, even if you look at Martin Luther King Jr., there were people that when he would come to town, they would say, please leave. You're going to bring us trouble. We don't want to hear it. We'll deal with it our own way. Heck, again, go back to my 3 years on the south side of Chicago. People forget that he was hit upside the head with a brick on the south side of Chicago. So I look at what we're going through now, politically, geopolitically, economically, and then I look at where our society is when it comes to race, when it comes to socioeconomic status, when it comes to how we interact from a neighborly perspective, how we interact and progress our children through the education system, how jobs are coming back, how we view our future. And all it takes is just one or two more incidences. The Trayvon Martin thing was plenty. And I don't want to see, and you agree, disagree, want to hear your feedback. And I know we're going into social matters versus political matters, but that's fine. It's still all of our country. As I wrap this up, I just don't want to see all of the anger and hurt. And I remember seeing friends of mine, people that I love genuinely, cry on television after the Zimmerman verdict was announced. You take that hurt and you move it over to this case in Valdosta, Georgia, with all of the political fighting, all of the stuff that's been building up over the last several years underneath this president in this quote-unquote recovery, with some of the Supreme Court decisions that have been coming out, some of the laws that have been rolled out, the mistrust that's going on all throughout the United States, and you allow that to be baked over with another case where race has a very prominent hand in it, where socioeconomic issues come to play to the forefront. I pray for this country if that ends up being the case with this case in Valdosta, because we're going to need really strong political, moral, and patriotic leadership. And it's going to have to be post-partisan and post-racial and all those things that President Obama was supposed to be. It's going to have to be all of those things, because if it's not, this decade could start going down the path of the 1960s. Except now we have more gangbangers. Now we have students that don't have as much hope. Now we have more dissension, more corruption, and less of an opportunity to pull us out of this rut. What do you think? You know where to find me on Twitter, LENNYMCALLISTER. You know where to find me on Facebook, tinyurl.com/LENNYPAGE. For those that are taking their kids out to trick-or-treat, or if you may be trick-or-treating yourself later on, be safe, have fun, be blessed. In the meanwhile, pray for our nation. Make it a better nation with what you do each and every day. I'll talk to you later on. TCNGB, I love you. Peace.
Darkness falls across the land. The midnight hour is close at hand. Creatures crawl in search of blood.